Hey, this is Coach Brody. Before we even get into this one, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification. If there's somebody who you feel like this information could benefit, go ahead and send it to them.
So one thing I do want to break down is the difference between a dominant sexual ego and a submissive sexual ego, and the mind state you have to be in to be able to fully take part in these different things, right? These are some things that is very important to understand, right? So when you are in a dominant sexual ego, the level of pleasure that you can experience is going to be greatly diminished, right? The physical pleasure that you can experience, the emotional pleasure that you can experience, to a certain extent. A lot of the times, there are things that people say that they can't do, right? There's things that people say that they can't do that other people can do, and then other people will say that those things aren't possible, right? People say those things aren't possible. So a lot of the times that might be like a woman who's unable to have orgasms from vaginal penetration. But there are so many more things than that, right? When a woman gets deep enough into her submissive sexual ego, she can have penetrative orgasms, G-spot, A-spot, O-spot. She gets deep enough into it, she can even have, cervical orgasms. But orgasms go like beyond that as well. Like a woman can have an orgasm from strong eye contact. A woman can have an orgasm from kissing. A woman can have an orgasm from giving head, whether it's just in her mouth or whether it's in her throat. A woman can have an orgasm from getting a massage. A woman can have an orgasm from getting a foot rub. A woman can have an orgasm just from closing her legs together. Now, the thing about a dominant sexual ego, and when I explain this, I break it down like this. A dominant sexual ego is where you are the primary giver of pleasure and you're the secondary receiver of pleasure, and you're the primary receiver of control and the secondary giver of control. Now, what this means is the pleasure that you're taking out of it is the ego gratification of feeling desirable and the ego gratification of having control over that other person, right? So when you have a dominant sexual ego, you're going to not come as fast. You may not come as often because you're going to be in a mind state to where you're focusing on the control and the pleasure you're giving someone else. So when you understand this, you can understand that when somebody's masculine and dominant, chances are they're not going to come fast. Now, and there's going to be a variety of ways they won't be able to orgasm when you have a dominant sexual ego sometimes. Like, there may be things you're attracted to, but you got to understand that in the grand scheme of relationships, I look at sexuality on a basis as part of how relationships run, right? Oftentimes, sex can be a microcosm or a barometer of your overall relationship. So when you're looking at things from that perspective, I look at dom-sub dynamics not from a point of view of saying, okay, yeah, we're into BDSM, but that doesn't affect anything outside of our relationship. I'm like, no, I believe in every relationship should have a certain level of understanding what their DS dynamic is, right? Because let's say a man has a dominant sexual ego and he's dealing with a woman who has a dominant sexual ego, right? Now, let's say that's what's going on. When that happens, oftentimes the two people will cancel out, right? The two people can cancel out. So let's say the woman, she gets aroused by feeling like the man's experiencing pleasure. So she may not start really getting into it until she feels like the guy is close. And if she's never had a vaginal orgasm from penetration before, if she doesn't start feeling close until she feels like the guy is getting close, then 9 out of 10, that guy's going to come before she does. So let's say he starts getting close, and it might take him 10 to 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds after he starts getting close, where he starts maybe moaning and groaning and stuff like that, and then he gets his orgasm. For a woman with a dominant sexual ego, that control is what turns her on, but it's not necessarily something that gives her more pleasure. It might give her the freedom and the opportunity to start getting into it, but that doesn't give her the pure pleasure. Now, this is why I think it's important for most of the time for the man to have the dominant sexual ego, unless just naturally the way your body's built and the chemistry you have is going to be high enough to take a woman to that place, right? There's something to understand. Maybe your body's just aligned. You can use your dominant ego and integrate yourself, and you can learn to dominate yourself. And that's kind of how sex toys work, right? And that's how sex toys at times can be something that causes a woman to be at a place where that's going to be more pleasurable than the sex she has with her man. Now, how this can happen and how this can affect things is if she has the highest level of pleasure with her man, but then her masturbating is something that's still close enough in pleasure to where she does it's more exciting than the idea of sleeping with someone else, then it's something that can greatly help their ability to be in a monogamous relationship. But if the pleasure that she experiences from masturbating with her toys or just masturbating on her own or however she does it is greater than the pleasure she experiences from her man, but let's say she uses a dildo that's bigger than her man or got a different shape than her man, but there's another, that dildo is modeled after another man, then there's a good chance that if she views the curiosity as greater than the realized chemistry she has with her man, then the fact that she has more pleasure from using that dildo is going to be something that's going to cause her to be more attracted to another man or more attracted to a man or a woman who is willing or able to use those sex toys in the same way. Right? So that means she would need to deal with the man who's feminine and submissive, who's willing and okay with her dealing with other men, or she's going to have to deal with a man who's secure enough within his femininity and submissiveness for him to want to give her pleasure without it being a matter of her receiving the validation of it being his own penis. Because, you know, some people say that this is sexist or whatever it is. I don't really give a fuck. The way I look at it is like this. You know, there's a certain connection that happens where when you're having vaginal orgasm, when you're having penetrative sex, right? Where a woman can not only she doesn't only just get the pleasure from the penis going inside of her, she also gets to feel the heat off of it, to feel that it's organic. She gets to feel it throbbing inside of her. She gets to feel the head growing and shrinking. She gets to feel it jump when he orgasms. She gets to feel it shooting inside of her. She gets the ego stroke of knowing that she's giving him pleasure at the same time that she's receiving pleasure, and that it's something to where it's intrinsic, right? They're both getting pleasure out of it at the same time. And there's not really any other sex act. I mean, you could do that with anal too, but outside of penetration, there's not really a sex act to where both people are receiving that same level of pleasure until you reach a high level of dom-sub dynamics, to where, let's say, a woman's giving you head, and because she's very feminine and submissive with you, she can have an orgasm from sucking your dick, right? Or let's say a man is on the very much switch side, or he's very feminine and submissive himself, so he gets so turned on by eating a woman's pussy that he can have an orgasm from eating pussy. Now, as a masculine dominant man, that's not something I've experienced. I would like to be able to experience that one day, and I could probably teach myself to, the same way that I've taught myself to be able to shoot my orgasm like 6.5 feet. Yes, I've measured it. Or to have the ability to teach myself to have multiple orgasms as a man. You know, those are different things you can do. You can dominate yourself to learn how to have certain experiences. But what that does is, if that experience doesn't get attached to a specific person, and that's a person who you're connected to and who you have a dynamic with, then it's going to limit your ability to attach and to grow an attachment and pretty much an addiction to that individual based off of the sexual chemistry that you have. And a lot of people are afraid of giving up control and being addicted to a person sexually. But the truth is this: if you're not addicted to that person sexually, then your sex drive for that individual is going to be much more flaky. Your sex drive for that individual is going to be much more depending on your mood, what kind of day you had, whether you're hungry, whether you're sleepy, whether you're tired, whether you had a good day, whether you had a bad day. It's going to be much more flimsy and flaky. And if you're dealing with an individual who has a dominant sexual ego, then they're going to be less satisfied with you because of how flaky and inconsistent your sex drive is. There's a difference between using pleasure denial as a dominant to increase the desire of your submissive than it is for the person who's playing the role of your submissive to not be feminine and emotional enough and to desire you on a consistent enough basis to reciprocate your sexual desire. So that means if you're not able to do it, she's like, all right, cool, I get a break, right? Or if she doesn't want to do it, then it's like, okay, now I got to hold myself back. And then that starts to lead to sexual polarity erosion and frustration. And the woman might get cheated on, right? If she goes an extended period of time without having sex with a man, or if she only does it in a robotic way, or he might just leave, right? It's very, cut and dry, very robotic, very mechanical, instead of there being some passion within it. And a lot of this is based off of the dom-sub dynamics. Another aspect of it is, you have a submissive sexual ego. That's going to be something to where, I'll be transparent in this video. Like, I'm a guy who has a foot fetish. I love feet. Like, I grew up watching so much damn porn that I'm a little overstimulated with that. And that's helped me. Like, when you're masculine and dominant, a certain level of overstimulation is good because it keeps you from getting into your feminine energy or your submissive energy simply because a woman is attractive. And then now you lack the ability to vet a woman based off of how she treats you, right? But what it does is it can limit your ability to have certain experiences. So let's say you're so used to sleeping with attractive women that you're not going to come fast just because a woman's attractive. if she has a dominant sexual ego, or there's something that needs to be tapped into, right, then what's going to happen is she's going to be unsatisfied at the fact that it's so easy for you to hold your orgasm, right? So when you understand that, it puts you in a different mindset and a different perspective, right? So something else to understand about that is, like, for me, let's say you have to be able to build that desire. You have to be able to get to that place where you greatly desire it, that emotion, that thinking about it when you're not around, that building up the intensity. It makes edging a much more difficult process than it would be. But when the desire level is really high, then instead of feeling like you get a break when you're not doing it, you feel like you're waiting on it. So let me bring that back to the foot fetish topic, right? When you have a more of a submissive ego, something that can happen is you can have orgasms from a variety of things, and it's going to be very pleasurable for you. Like, if you ever go on Twitter, watch porn and shit on there, there's a lot of foot job videos on there, and that shit is awesome. There's some people that I like on there. But when you have a very dominant sexual ego, then the pleasure that you're getting from a foot job may not be something that can make you come all the time, right? Instead of waiting being something that makes you get into it more, waiting can be something that turns you off because you're not in control, right? Be something that turns you off because you're not in control. So you would have to be able to do that to yourself, and it makes edging a more difficult process. So when you're in a dominant sexual ego, you're turned on by control. The greatest pleasure comes from losing control. The greatest pleasure comes from giving up control. So when you're in that different type of perspective, it may be difficult to have orgasms from things that don't give you as much stimulation. So, like, I know for me, when I'm dealing with a woman, when you're dominant, you have to be able to teach a woman anything that you like, right? Because a submissive woman oftentimes may not take certain initiatives. A submissive woman may not have as much of a dominant streak, right? So because she may not have that, or because you may not be as receptive to that, something that can happen along the way is that it'll take a lot more stimulation. So let's say a woman's giving you head, she's hitting you with the throat, she's hitting you with the double fist twist, spitty, slurpy, popping, gok 4,000. And when she's hitting you with that, it still might take her like 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes to make you have an orgasm, right? And then you have to learn how to flex your own muscles in order to get there. Now, there's benefits, right? There's different ways where you can compartmentalize your submissive sexual ego into different areas of your sex life so that you can still have that effect of that higher level of pleasure. So you can do that with head, with getting head. You can do that even with giving head. You can do that with a different variety of things so that you can experience that submissive sexual ego, so your pleasure is high enough so you have some level of attachment to the individual based off the pleasure that you're getting. Now, the way this relates to relationships, in my mind and Coach Brody's mind, is that you still have to integrate those things into a relationship, because every person has masculine, feminine, dominant, and submissive within them. So if you're masculine dominant, you're dealing with a woman, you have to teach her the things that you like. After she's on your program, after she's dealing with you for a while, that's where you get to the point where you start to integrate your submissive sexual ego into the sex, and you teach her to her, and then you let her take the pleasure of being able to give you a very high level of pleasure. But if you start off like that, then it could be a woman who's simply feminine and dominant, or a woman who's masculine and submissive, and then she may lose respect for you, right? There's a variety of things that may happen where let's say you're dealing with a woman who's feminine and dominant, right? She may feel like because she dominated you that you're not really dominant anymore, right? So she'll feel like she won the challenge, and then she'll walk away, or she'll get bored, she'll lose interest. There's a variety of ways that this can work. And also, if you get overstimulated with submissiveness, it makes it difficult for you to think logically, because the high level of pleasure makes you more of a feminine person, because you start to desire that person. You get attached to that person based off of the pleasure that they give you. And once you get attached to an individual person because of the pleasure that they give you, because they gave you a pleasure that somebody else couldn't give you, then it puts you into a state of mind where you're more attached to the individual. And if you get attached to an individual on a feminine basis based off of the pleasure that they give you or the control that they give you, and you don't know how to recreate that with someone else, then it can put you into a mind state where you get attached to somebody who's going to be not good for you. It's going to be a toxic situation eventually. So the dominant and submissive sexual ego work a variety of ways. It's a time and a place for everything, right? If you're a woman, you're feminine and submissive. You don't want to get overly caught up in the idea of wanting to be in your dominant energy, right? In your dominant sexual energy, because you're going to feel insecure that that guy can fuck you for an hour. You're going to feel insecure that he can fuck you for 30 minutes. You're going to feel insecure if he wants to take control, or if he wants to take some time and to show you how to have vaginal orgasm from penetration, but not focusing as much on giving you head, because he's trying to shift that place where you focus your orgasmic energy. And he wants to shift that from your clitoris to your vagina, to the specific spots, so that you can go further. Because there's some women who, having a clitoral orgasm, will get their engine running, so that after they have that orgasm, they're going to be more open to being able to have a vaginal orgasm from penetration afterwards. But for some women, when they have a dominant sexual ego, after they get that one, they're done. They get that one clitoral orgasm, then they're done. And then they're just waiting for you to go ahead and have sex and get it over with. That's like the women who like quickies. That's the women who like dudes who come fast. That's the women who aren't really concerned with having a vaginal orgasm from penetration. Like in the same way, a man with a dominant sexual ego oftentimes is not going to have his ass played with, right? Because he doesn't want to put himself in that vulnerable position. Yes, logically, we can say that based on the studies, based off of the research, that a prostate orgasm is going to be more powerful than an orgasm you're going to get from your penis, right? Now, what people do is they try to say that, oh, there's no difference between a clitoral and a vaginal orgasm, or vaginal orgasms don't exist. It's just all part of the clitoral legs. That's bullshit. They are purposefully lying to you as part of this propaganda to denigrate male and female sexual relationships, right? Now, I'm not somebody who is against the gay community. I've given coaching sessions to gay people because I love people. I love love. But even within gay relationships, it's still important to have a certain level of masculine, feminine, and dom-sub dynamics. And oftentimes, there's a certain inherent level of femininity within a woman that she might repress because she's low, right? Because her cup is low. Sometimes with a man, there's a certain inherent level of dominance within him, right? Masculinity or dominance. And with the woman, maybe a repressed level of femininity and submissiveness that when their cup is low, they'll go to, right? So an example of that would be like sometimes a man will be in prison for a long ass time. And when he's there for a long time, he might eventually say, you know what, fuck it, I'll try it. And then you start fucking with a dude, right? Or let's say a woman, she may be in a place where she gets tired of feeling like sex is something that she does for a man. So eventually she gets tired of feeling like her cup is getting drained by having sex with a man. So she may get to the place where her desire level starts to lower, right? And as she feels like she's not getting what she deserves out of it, or she's getting plenty of validation, but it's not doing anything for her, she might get to the place where she decides that she wants to become, either celibate, lesbian, or deal with the beta male. That's typically how it works. So there's a certain balance to the sex positivity shit that I like to bring up, right? Like, I don't judge a woman based off of the number of partners that she's had, right? But at the same time, masculinity and dominance is going to be based off your good dick and guidance. It's going to be based off of that emotional effect that you have on a woman, to where she desires your validation, she desires your approval, right? And you have to have the leadership to follow through with that and to set expectations and to lead. But at the same time, you got to have some good dick. And if the dick is not good, it's not going to have the same effect on a woman, especially if she's had better dick before. And the less you can take a woman to a next level sexually based off of your penetrative sex, the more she's going to value you for feminine things, or the more you're going to have to take a stance of putting her in her dominant sexual ego, or the more you're going to have to take a stance of being manipulative with her and pretty much abusive with her in order to take her to a place where her emotions are wrapped up enough for her to go to a new place sexually. So you might have to go to some depraved places. You may have to do some toxic shit. Toxicity ranges from moral to amoral to immoral. So not everything is bad. And if you agree with it, it's not bad, you understand it. But it's still how much you're going to have to do. So for some men, they try to take a masculine submissive role with a woman, right? They try to take a masculine submissive role where they want to provide a woman with financial resources, try to love a woman, try to give her emotional validation in order to have sex with her. And she might take that. She might even get into a relationship with him. He's offering social validation. If you're taking it to me, why wouldn't I take it? If her cup's low, she'll take it, right? Because it's just like a hungry dog. Same thing happens with men with ugly women, with women they're not attracted to. When their cup gets low, then they're going to lower their standards and they're going to go through sexual disintegration. So something that can happen along those lines is, let's say A woman is, it's like a hungry dog. You know, you offer them some meat, they're gonna take it. But once you get full, it's gonna be more so about, you know, what's gonna taste better, or it's gonna be more so about listening to their master, listening to their dominant, listening to their leader, right? And as a man, when you get to a higher level of your mindset, then it's going to be less about taking whatever is presented to you and then having more standards about what it is that you actually take. So it's going to be a little bit different. You know, if a man ain't had sex in a long time and it wasn't by choice, then whatever gets presented to him, that's what he's going to fuck on. That's just how it works, right? His standards lower. So a man may say, well, I only fuck with 8s, 9s, and 10s. Or a man may say, well, I only fuck with 7s and 8s, you know, and up. But when his cup gets real low and an opportunity presents itself, it's easy to him, then he might fuck a 5. You know what I mean? Those are things that happen. We got to be honest about that. Man, we got to be more honest about that, right? So when we're looking at the whole topic of a dominant sexual ego and a submissive sexual ego, the pleasure that you experience is going to be based off of how feminine and submissive you are. There's different experiences that you can have when you're emotional, you're desiring that specific individual, and you're submissive. That femininity will lubricate you for how submissive you are so that you can handle certain things, right? It's just like one way of looking at it is that emotionality is what lubricates you for the domination. So you can get dominated by an individual who is masculine when you're feminine, right? That means that they can tell you exactly what they're trying to do. They can set your expectations. They don't have to trick you to do it. Because that's what happens when you're masculine submissive. The polarity is going to have you with the feminine dominant who's going to manipulate you to dominate you. Because that manipulation is going to be what makes you feel more emotional in that moment. But then after you get out of that moment, then your mindset's going to change, and then you're going to rethink the way that scenario worked. That's the reason why I don't look at every scenario where a woman says that her ex was narcissistic and abusive and all this other shit as something that was so bad. Because one thing that happens with masculine submissives is that femininity is what lubricates you for domination. And oftentimes the most dominant thing that can happen, not always, but just a rule of thumb, is getting penetrated. So if a man is feminine submissive enough, he get penetrated, orgasm penetration. If he's masculine submissive, he's like, all right, cool, I guess I got to do this because I got to do this. Oftentimes masculine submissive can work like being a prostitute, right? You know, masculine submissive can work like prostitution. It's like going to a 9-to-5 job when you have, you know, if you've never had anything else in your life that you could do, if you've never experienced being masculine and dominant owning your own job, or if you're burnt out from trying to run your own business, or if you've never had a passion that you love, or if you love your passion enough that you just got to do whatever you got to do to get that money, and it's enough money, then somebody may take that masculine submissive role, right? And when they take that masculine submissive role, it's not something they want to do forever or consistently, but they'll give their body and time and energy to it enough to get what they want out of it. It's transactional. So something that can happen is, you know, just like a woman can be dealing with a man and she may be masculine submissive, so he's going to have to manipulate her to get her to the place, or damn near rape her. And I know that sounds fucked up, but a lot of women have their first orgasms from being raped. There's a lot of women who are into consensual non-consent because their conscious mindset is too masculine, too rigid for them to be able to be pushed into a place of submissiveness just naturally, unless they're being forced. So they're going to need to get fucked really rough for them to have an orgasm, or it's going to have to be something, a very slow, gradual process to get there. But when you're feminine and submissive, certain things can just get ripped like a band-aid. You can just rip the band-aid with certain things. Like, let's say a woman is never deep-throated. If she's masculine and submissive, her mindset is going to think about the discomfort of throwing up. So she's going to be uncomfortable with that. But if a woman's feminine and submissive, she's going to be so emotionally excited about the idea of pleasing that man that he could just put it in her throat. If she throws up, cool. And if that dude is cool with it, then it's going to be more exciting. It's like, damn, I just threw up on a dick today. But if a woman is masculine submissive, then she can be like, I'm so scared. I don't want to throw up on it. What if it hurts? When you're feminine submissive, that femininity is what lubricates you for the domination. So when that femininity and that desire, that attraction lubricates you for the domination, then you rip the band-aid, goes right in the throat. And, you know, it might happen the first time, the second time. But in my experience, after like maybe the first 2 times or first 2-3 times, then after that, unless a woman's going a long time without doing it, or she just had a lot on her stomach, or she was drunk that night, she's probably not going to throw up. And if you take a mindset to where you don't give a fuck if she throws up, if you grow an attraction to in a dominant sexual ego about a woman losing control of her faculties, that'll also help with squirting. Oftentimes, I've been plenty of women who are afraid that they were going to pee when we were having sex. You got to get to the point as a man where if you're like, well, what if it is pee? And then you're on the fence about it too, then you're not going to make that woman feel safe and comfortable enough to do that. Tell a woman, I don't care if it's pee. If you pee, if any liquid comes out of you when I'm fucking you, I'm gonna say that you squirted regardless. So if you gotta piss, you might as well, like, if you gotta pee when I'm giving you stimulation and I'm hitting that spot and you feel that pressure come out, just let that shit go. let it go. Like, I don't give a fuck, right? And that's kind of the mindset you gotta take, is I don't give a fuck attitude, right? And that I don't give a fuck attitude, it makes you seem more masculine because you're not real fidgety. You're not really worried about certain things and you're dominant about it. So one thing about a dominant sexual ego oftentimes is when you get really dominant, you're not turned off by involuntary bodily functions, right? You develop that kink. In developing that kink for involuntary bodily functions, like maybe a woman throwing up your dick or maybe a woman, peeing, when you're having sex or something like that, it helps a woman out, right? Queefs, right? That's an involuntary bodily function. Then it helps a woman really get into it. Another involuntary bodily function is like dudes talk about women having loose pussies. You got to understand that when a woman gets very aroused, her vagina will open up. It will get more relaxed. It'll get more comfortable. She'll get more lubricated, and it's not going to be as tight as it was, right? Now, if you're always talking about, I like that real tight pussy, sometimes you might just like tight pussy because you're used to dealing with women who don't really like your ass, right? But a woman can go past that point, and then she can learn to do Kegels so that she can tighten it up on her own. And then you can tell her to tighten up, and she can even use those Kegels to help herself have more orgasms, right? But what I will say about a dominant sexual ego versus a submissive sexual ego is this. When you have a dominant sexual ego, somebody's helping you facilitate the orgasm you're giving yourself. They're facilitating your orgasm. When you have a submissive sexual ego, somebody's forcing you to orgasm. So, and you can look at orgasms on a basis of involuntary contractions that give a high level of pleasure, right? So every time you're receiving stimulation, whether mentally or physically, see that mental stimulation, when you're feminine and submissive, you have a high level of mental stimulation that precedes the physical stimulation. So you're already aroused. You smell that man's cologne. You're kissing that man. He touches you. He's feeling on you. He grabs certain parts of your body that otherwise would feel uncomfortable if other people touched him. He squeezes on you. He chokes you. He pulls your hair. You're so aroused that your whole body becomes an erogenous zone because you're feminine and submissive. So when you're in that place, he can just look you in your eyes and it'll make your clit jump, right? And you'll start having contractions. And wherever you focus your pleasure and your desire at, you're going to be closer and closer to having an orgasm before that time comes. So it's a bunch of contractions, right? So physical stimulation can create contractions, and also mental stimuli can create attractions, and emotional stimuli can create contractions. So really, I look at it like climbing a rock, right? Let's say you're rock climbing. When you're climbing a rock, let's say you're not used to it. You don't always know what's the most steady rock to reach to. So you might get tired. If you don't have the stamina, you might get tired. You won't be able to get there. But what's going on is you're climbing a rock. One might break off. If your feet weren't steady where you were before then, as you're climbing up with your contractions, then what's going to happen is you might fall down some. And if you don't have the stamina to fall down and get back up as you're going up that rock wall, then you won't reach the top of it to where you hit the buzzer. But if you know the proper places to place your hands, you get a good rhythm going, you have the ability to sustain that even if you lose that rhythm, like even if he slows down or speeds up, then those things can help you even more, right? Those things can help you even more. So oftentimes, if a woman's never had an orgasm before, then if you do anything different when she starts getting close, it's going to fuck it up. Like women always say, oh, guys, don't change it up. Don't change it up. If I say I like that, don't change it up. That's what they say to dudes who already don't know what they're doing. Me, I'm a dom. I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do. So for me, if I'm dealing with a woman, I might speed it up to make it more intense because I already got her rhythm and I know how to do that. Or I might slow it down to edge her out so it's even more powerful when it happens. But when you start off, you got to stay consistent first so that you can get it to happen at all. But then after that, you can move on to different things. Like you can use less stimulation, more stimulation, add stimulation. Certain things can be overstimulating, right? And that overstimulation is something to where sometimes it can make the orgasm happen immediately, but sometimes if you're masculine submissive, it can divert your focus and then you lose your orgasm altogether. So there are some women who they say, okay, well, have sex with me, but I'll just go DJ. You know what I mean? You know what go DJ is. And I don't have no issue with that. But I do think that, you know, the standard of what you should consider being sexually compatible with your partner, in my eyes, should be that you can have vaginal orgasm from penetration purely, right? That's the standard I set, but that's not it for everybody, right? Because I think more women can than think they can. And as a man, if you're with that woman and she can't with you, and then she does it with the next man, even though she told you she couldn't, and then she come back to you, you're not going to be happy about that, right? You're not. And then a woman will try to gaslight, well, I didn't know I could. It was just, no. You don't want to hear that shit. Set that shit as a standard and work your way towards it. You got to know how to hit the right angles, hit the right spots, study your dick, teach her to put herself and angle her body to where you're hitting directly on her spot. Learn how to adequately arouse her, learn how to edge, and she has to be attracted to you enough and desire you enough and horny enough for edging to work, or she's just going to be sitting there bored. And that's something that can happen when you have a dominant sexual ego, right? You have to get into your submissive sexual ego for edging to work, right? Because that's the difference between frustration and getting a higher level of desire. And if you know that there's going to be a reward for that delayed gratification, then that delayed gratification just makes it something that makes it even more pleasurable, more desirable, more intense, and more explosive when you finally get the orgasm. But just like the rock climbing thing, you know, after you start climbing that rock, you can climb bigger rocks. You can climb different kind of rocks. You get good enough, you can climb shit that's not even rocks. That's how orgasms work. So a woman might get her first one, you know, and if she gets her first one, she might start with clitoris, because most women, they start off with clitoral orgasms because that's how they masturbate themselves, right? But something that can limit a woman sexually is if she gets into her dominant sexual ego with herself, or she has certain fantasies in her mind that she uses to have orgasms, she doesn't attach that to a specific person that she's dealing with, then something that can happen along the way is that it's the same thing that can happen with porn. Like men, usually more visual, so they watch porn. Women will often read, you know, sex novels. And when you build that fantasy up in your mind, you can get overstimulated to where when another person is in your presence, you can't have that same feeling of building up that arousal, building up that desire, building up that intensity over time. So when it finally gets to it, now you're at a place where it's like, okay, cool, this is underwhelming, because you built it up in your mind so much without sharing that with a partner. And the same thing can happen with men when it comes to masturbating. Like I know, and listen, I know for me, shit, I could probably masturbate like goddamn, depending on what day it is, maybe 40 seconds, a minute and a half. Don't take me too long. But if I'm having sex, it's gonna take me a minute. And I trained myself to think that way. I trained my body and my mind to behave that way with sex. But like I said, eventually you have to integrate into that. You have to integrate your submissive sexual ego so that you aren't more satisfied by something other than your partner. If you actually have a partner where you have a good, healthy dynamic with each other, you want that to be the peak of your sexual experiences, right? If you have certain superlatives of your experiences, the more superlatives you can focus on within your experiences, within your fantasies, within the types of orgasms or the places you've had sex, or the biggest dick you had, or best pussy, the wettest, you know, the tightest, the best riding, best dick sucking, the more of those things that you can get within your relationship to attach to the person that you're with, the easier it will be for you to be faithful to them. And the less you play with fire, it's going to be easier. But the issue with playing with fire is when curiosity is greater than realized chemistry. And sometimes that is one of the biggest things that leads to cheating. That's one of the biggest things that lead to neglect. Curiosity shouldn't be greater than your realized chemistry. You should attach your guilty pleasures and your curiosity to your partner, right? Instead of saying, well, I wonder what it's like to fuck with this person, you say, I wonder what this man is going to do to me next, right? Instead of it being, ooh, this girl, she kind of bad, I wanted that pussy good. As a dominant, you shouldn't be focusing on how good a woman's vagina is, because if you're focusing too much on that, then you're going to get bored and tired of dealing with your woman eventually, because you've had it too many times, and then now you're going to be looking for the next thing. So, these are just some things to understand about a dominant sexual ego and a submissive sexual ego. It's Brody. I'm out.